Welcome back in. It's now 8:27. I'm Mike Allen at the First Alert Update Desk. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche has cleared another hurdle on his way to getting confirmed for the full-time job. This was probably his toughest obstacle. There were some Republican holdouts on the Senate Judiciary Committee blocking his path forward, but they just voted 12-10 along party lines this morning to move him forward. Those holdouts were concerned about Blanche's ties to President Trump, not just as his former personal attorney, but also about the settlement of Trump's lawsuit against the IRS, where Blanche negotiated a $1.8 billion fund for Trump's political allies using taxpayer money. Now, those two Republican holdouts made Blanche take that fund off the table, but he did keep another part of that deal, which is tax audit immunity for President Trump and his family. Jason Dio.